Heyo people, how's it going? So usually I like to start Fimis out with some kind of opening or skit or something. And back in the day, that was usually because I had to kill 30 seconds because the show's title has a profanity in it. But YouTube has recently eased off of that whole weird policy of not being able to swear in the first 30 seconds. So we don't need to do these anymore, but I don't know, force of habit. I just feel like I should think of something. Too bad I don't have any ideas for this one in particular. Pussy fart? Heyo people and welcome to Pussy Fart, where, goddammit. Heyo people and welcome to Fimi, or fuck, I missed it. This time around we've got 27 new releases from Q2 this year, and believe it or not, all of these releases are actually from Q2. I'm doing a lot better in keeping track of all that, and I'm even throwing a few extra super late catch-ups towards the end here. So altogether we've got about 30 albums to talk about this time around. Let's not waste any time and get right to it, shall we? Okay, maybe this one is cheating for Q2, but come on, it came out the very last day of March. I was super duper busy when this album dropped, so I didn't get a chance to talk about it at all. Which is a shame, because this album gives me a lot to talk about. Absolutely wonderful bit of indie rock from this new supergroup composed of Lucy Dacus, Julian Baker, and Phoebe Bridgers. I mean, I know you've probably heard a ton of hype about this album, but folks, the hype is pretty real. This one was really damn good. Tracks on here: aching, heartfelt, fun, sour, silly, and like every single mood in between, all across the record without feeling, well, too scatterbrained. You can tell by the quality of the writing and the quality of the performances here, they put a lot of heart and soul into this, and it very much shows. I would say that in terms of like chemistry and terms of blending their sounds together and creating a style that's uniquely boygenius, in terms of making something that sounds very specific to this project, they did okay, but I really want to know what some of y'all are smoking, because I've seen people say this is such a wonderful melding of styles, and to be honest, it's not. They do all three work well together, and they all brought a material to this project, but in listening through it, yeah, I feel like, at least, I could clearly tell whose songs were whose. But I'm just saying, I could easily tell, oh, this is a Lucy track, this bouncy, really peppy song is a Julian track. Like, I actually discovered Julian Baker through this project. I hadn't really heard a lot of her stuff prior to this, and yeah, she's great. I'm glad I finally got introduced to her. And when a Phoebe Bridgers track came on, I was just like, okay. I guess that's one of the reasons why it doesn't sit like a perfect 10 with me. I don't hate Phoebe Bridgers, but I've just never fully gotten all the hype behind her. It's just never fully clicked for me. She's a little dozy. She's a little sleepier than I like to get. It's one of those records where it's not flawless, not by a long shot, at least in my opinion. But when it is strong, it is very, very strong. So that more than makes up for a few loose ends, for a few snoozier moments. I'm still gonna give this a very, very strong rating. But I'm just saying, it ain't flawless. Ooh, Tribulation. I was wanting to see what they would do after Jonathan Holton's departure from the group a few years back. They released an EP back in April, and you know, they still are doing a good job of blending like smooth, pillowy sort of soundscapes with the fierce, dark, menacing vocals and lyrical styles. It's still that very trademark Tribulation weird blend of ethereal and just mess the fuck up black metal shit. It is still Tribulation, and I'd say it's still pretty solid. Oh, but man, it's not It's not quite the same without Jonathan behind the helms, is it? I mean, it's a very short EP too, so this doesn't even give me a lot to necessarily judge their sound off of, but you can tell they're still trying to hammer out the basics of how to keep going without Jonathan Holton behind the axe. And I do gotta say, that last track where they just give up and try to be Diet Ghost, y'all ain't gotta do that. But overall, not too shabby, not bad for what it is. Still interested to see what they can pull off once they put out another full-length record, but I don't know, I guess we'll see. Hey, new Covet record. Cool. Okay, I know, but like, come on, y'all. What do you want me to say? It's Covet. You know what you're getting with this band. It's Yvette Young just slaying the shit out of her guitar for another solid 25 to 30 minutes. Her band still provides some very compelling background work. And on this record, you know, there's even an occasional bit of like violin or very subtle keyboards here and there to help spice up the general sound a little bit, sure. But outside of that, I mean, I'm sorry, y'all, I don't have much else to add. It's another Covet record. What else do you want out of them? But you know, it's been interesting watching Covet and a lot of the other math rock bands as that whole trend begins to really die off. Man, I remember back like, God, was it even 2 to 3 years ago when like every other album request I get was some generic Dance Gavin Dance wannabes. It's been interesting to see what bands in that scene have staying power and have something that can actually carry them through the actual fad period, and what bands we're thankfully going to be losing out of this whole experience. I really didn't think Dance Gavin Dance was going to be one of them, but yeah, given what's going on with them, they should go away. But all that having been said, yeah, Covet is still one of the best bands out there. In my book, at least, Covet is still a name worth paying attention to. This is another great Covet record, and I mean, yeah, that's all you really gotta know. Wow, this is one of those records that has been just exploding with buzz and hype, and I've been listening to this one off and on for at least the last 3 months now, and like, I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about it, y'all. I do like it, I should say that up front. I mean, this thing is gonna walk away with a recommendation, but y'all, ooh, this band, their general sound is just so schizophrenic? Is that the word I'm looking for? Like, it's got this kind of gnarly, lo-fi, sort of 90s alternative blast to it. Like, in places, y'all, this record honestly sounds like if Early Garbage, or say a band like Belly or Veruca Salt, were trying to channel Dinosaur Jr. or Pavement. It does have that alternative, almost punk-sounding heaviness to it, but man, it also dabbles in so many other styles. It's shoegaze in spots, it's honestly got a lot of country going on in the background. Yeah, this band has a dedicated lap steel player. And you know, to their credit, they are very great at every sound and style they attempt. Like, honestly, this record is very interesting, and I do like it on the whole. It took a while before I sort of got the vibe they were going for, and to be honest, I don't know, maybe I still don't 100% get the vibe they're going for, but like, again, another record where its strengths are really, really strong, but some of the other places it goes, again, schizophrenic. This album just kind of sounds like it's all over the place. Whiplash. This is Whiplash the record. If you sat down with this and weren't instantly mesmerized, don't feel too bad, because I'm right there with you, but man, the more I spin this one, the more I find interesting stuff that I dig about it. Again, I did really like this record, and this bad boy is absolutely getting a recommendation. But I would say give it more than a few chances, because this one may not click with you right away. Oh, y'all. The new Ruston Kelly. While not entirely covering the subject, this is the album that follows after his divorce from Casey Musgraves. And like, Ugh. You can tell it had a hell of an effect on the poor guy. To his credit, he doesn't sound angry or bitter. He certainly doesn't take anything out on her. These things are never fun to deal with, but at least it's nice when the two parties aren't at each other's friggin' throats. Like, how often do you see that? But yeah, you can tell this was a hell of a heartbreaker on the guy, and again, he doesn't spare anything on this album. He doesn't pull any punches. His pain is raw and real and aching and like crushing. But again, Ruston is able to pull off sad and melancholy without sounding melodramatic or too overtly weepy, particularly because he's just an excellent songwriter and he still has a hell of a way with melody and harmony and just basic songwriting in general. If you've ever felt heartbreak in your own experiences out there, man, you get what he's singing about. Though I will say, for everything I really like about this record, man, were there some mistakes made in the production. If there is one thing I unfortunately gotta take points off for on this one, I can sum it up in one word: reverb. There is just too much echoey shit going on this record. There's almost like a rock sound going on with a lot of the tracks. He definitely brings out the electric instruments a lot more, but in doing that, they also turned up the reverb on a lot of things, like just up to fucking 50. And in particular, they also did that to a lot of his vocal takes on this album. It works in places. It works very well in certain tracks. But they do it way too much. For some songs, it doesn't necessarily fit. Like, even some of the more upbeat tracks have that vocal reverb that sounds like he's singing in front of a fan. I don't give in to the weakness. It wasn't an album killer by any means, but it did prove to be really distracting in places. I don't know, there are tricks on this album that an artist as talented as Ruston Kelly doesn't necessarily need to pull off. I feel like running this by another producer, maybe running this through a few other people to kind of hammer out some of those flaws would have made it a better sounding record overall. But outside of some of the awkward production, this is still a very good Ruston Kelly record. I wouldn't say it's his best necessarily. In my opinion, at least, Shape and Destroy is pretty hard to top in that regard, but it is still very solid. It is still an outstanding country release in a year where country, it's been a weird year for country, but it has been a good year for country. And yeah, this is another one to add on top of that already stacked pile for the year. But again, it's Ruston Kelly. I wouldn't have expected anything less. Fantastic record. Oh, what the fuck happened here? So, you know when a band or an artist, they come across a period in their life, they're not doing so hot, and they're just like, yeah, let's make a dark record. I'm in a dark mood. I wrote a lot of dark songs. Let's write like a really dark and heavy record. And you know, that's not always a bad idea. Hell, some bands have written some of their best work when shifting to a much more heavy, gloomy, or sinister sound. Ministry, Judas Priest, even Blink-182 have seen success going a little bit darker and a little bit heavier than people would expect. Sure, it is a formula that can work. But those artists are the exception, not the rule. And a lot of bands aren't really equipped to make that kind of move, and fucking Waterparks? Oh, hell no, y'all. Hell no. And they just made the shift in sound as obnoxious as humanly possible. I love how the opening track is honestly, it sounds like a decent-ish pop-punky kind of Waterparks track that you would expect Waterparks to make. And then right as you're getting into the song, they cut it short, fucking MGK style, and then switch to the dark, edgy shit, and it sucks so bad. In my opinion, at least, one of the worst things you can do as a songwriter is to write and record an actually very solid track and then purposefully sabotage it just to make a statement. I'm making a point by sucking. Not that that can never work, but 99% of the time it doesn't. And yeah, you're fucking Waterparks. What did you think was gonna happen there? This sucks. I almost would have respected them if they'd at least had the balls to stick with the gimmick. I would at least appreciate that there was a vision behind it, but they give up. Hell, only like the first 3-4 tracks even bother playing around with that style. After the halfway point, this record shifts back into that same old sloshy, single brain cell style of pop punk that most people got sick of listening to around 2017. You guys had an idea there. It wasn't a very good one, but at least have the balls to stick with it. Waterparks were always a band that made the All-American Rejects look like freaking swans, but in trying to like show us their teeth on the first half of this record, all it really did was show us just how toothless they really are. The best example of this tonal clash going on here is Ritual, where they use the clip from that one meme, you know, this one.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die.
But given the song's context, they like mean it seriously. Like this is their sort of hardcore, dirty sex song, you know? It's got all these wannabe Nine Inch Nails synths and stuff. It's so dumb. Imagine if Nine Inch Nails Closer had opened with this audio preceding it.
Stop! I could have dropped my croissant!
That is the eternal problem a pop punk band has to face as they get older. You know, for a genre that kind of prides itself on how immature and childish it can be, the older you get, the less convincing that shit comes off. And everyone in this band is like in their 30s now. Like I hadn't been following these guys very closely, but I did hear this one was especially bad and like, yikes. Yeah, it's pretty awful, y'all. Like, what the hell happened to these guys? What made them? Oh, they signed to Fueled by Ramen. Okay. That honestly explains a lot. Like, good lord, Fueled by Ramen has just become the label pop punk bands go to die, hasn't it? Jesus. Ooh, now this was a record I really, really enjoyed. Airy, atmospheric, and absolutely blissful sounding electropop. This is a Finnish pop duo out of Helsinki, and their vocalist Sandra Tervonen has an extremely, like, high-pitched, almost mousy sounding voice. It's weird how well these two go together, isn't it? But the synth work is extremely smooth and mellow, the guitars are very crisp and bright, the drums are solid and rigid and very, very good at maintaining a balanced structural sort of framework. This is exactly the kind of electronica music that you put on, sit back and just go, oh. Sandra's vocals may be a sticking point for some. She definitely has that love it or hate it style of singing, but if that isn't a deal breaker for you, man, this will click with you very fast, and it's just so glittery and gorgeous and blissfully atmospheric. I would say this is something to definitely consider. It's great music to help bring you into a mellow mood. I don't know, speaking as an anxious motherfucker, I really appreciated how calming and almost numbing this music could be at times. It almost reminds me of some of those 90s trip-hop groups like Air or Solstice, or maybe even like the mellower side of Massive Attack or Portishead. Like, it's airy, it's sparse, but at the same time, very bright, very colorful, and it hits those right high moments in all the right places, while still maintaining a very chill mood. Like, if it doesn't click, I understand, but give it a try. If it does, it will big time. I wish I had more to say about this one, honestly. That's the thing. Enter Shikari. Their records, whether you love them or hate them, you can always say they go for broke. They take on big concepts. They try to execute big soundscapes. They are a very large and full and vibrant and huge feeling band. And this record, it's probably the only thing they've done since like maybe their very, very early work that just feels I guess that's what turns me off from this record most. How unambitious it sounds. There's just not a lot going on here. For an Enter Shikari record, most definitely. This album almost feels like a regression, or like they were trying to capture the same moment and feeling from a lot of their earlier records. Like the synths are much more front-facing and very bleepy bloopy. Shikari is a very bleepy bloopy rock band in general, but this one in particular, they're just right in your face. This album feels very flash flood of color or minesweep. Unlike their last several records, there doesn't appear to be much urgency or fascination or much of anything going on, both structurally and in the lyrics. I don't believe there's a central concept to this one. I guess that's what kind of weirds me out about this record. It's just a collection of songs. Or at least it certainly sounds that way. There's nothing really cohesive going on here. It's also extremely short for a Shikari record too. This thing is barely over 30 minutes. Again, for a band that likes to go big and bold and huge, like, that was a surprise. I guess the album is as long as it needs to be. I'm glad it didn't drag on and on. It's weird seeing so little commitment from Enter Shikari on a record, and that's kind of a worrying sign. It's not bad. I mean, the guys are still competent and they are still writing solid melodies and grooves here. It's not a terrible listen overall. It's just so much shallower and emptier and less exciting. I almost have to wonder if this album isn't like a contractual obligation, or if maybe there's something going on in the background with them. And I don't know, maybe that is just a problem more with my expectations than anything, but I don't know. I was expecting so much more and just did not get much out of this. Oh man, I wanted this to be more than it turned out to be. I really did. You know, The National are one of those bands I absolutely love, or at the very least, I loved a very specific era of theirs, like that run from Alligator to about Trouble Will Find Me. That is pretty hard to top in terms of like artistic indie rock, you know, that hipstercore kind of vibe. It doesn't get too much better than that era, you know what I mean? And for this record, I will say it does stick the landing a bit better than their last two. There's definitely a bit more energy and fun on this one. It isn't quite as dour and mopey as some of their previous works have been, but you also got to remember this is The National. Dour and mopey is just, this is kind of the vibe. That's why we're here. It does have a few pretty solid standouts, but it also has more than a handful of songs that meander a little bit. And I will say, for an album that has a guest list as crazy as this one does, Sufjan Stevens, Phoebe Bridgers on 2 tracks, and Taylor goddamn Swift, you'd really think they'd kind of push them forward a little bit more. Taylor definitely shows up on her song. She's Taylor freaking Swift. You're gonna make sure you get the most out of her as you can. But for Sufjan and even the Phoebe Bridgers tracks, like, I don't know, they show up, they sing a bit in the background, and then they fuck off. I don't know, if you didn't know they were there, you would probably miss them. I still did enjoy this record overall. I'll even go as far as to say it's better than their last couple of albums. But it is also just one of those records where you spin it a few times, find your favorite tracks, stick them on a playlist somewhere and then never come back to it again. The stuff that's good is good and it is worth catching, but is it an essential classic? Is it one of those all-time must-hear solid pieces? Nah. It's definitely a record that works better, again, in pieces than it does as a whole thing. Still, happy to have the National around and happy to see they're still putting out some good stuff. So, this album is a bit of a strange animal. It's composed of tracks that Bob Rock and Gord Downie had been casually passing to each other since he produced for the band back in the late 2000s, the World Container, We Are the Same era. So the two had been just kind of working in tandem with each other for a long time, and the idea seemed to be to release these songs as a solo album somewhere down the line at some point. But after Gord's diagnosis in 2016, yeah, plans on that came to a abrupt conclusion. Rock has even said that Gord's final wish to him was for this project to eventually see the light of day. So he finished polishing the tracks, and now we have Lustre Parfait. I'd say overall, this is a neat little time capsule of two friends collaborating together over the years. And man, you can really tell that this record is kind of a spiritual follow-up from the Hips 2000s era work. And you know, that is both this record's biggest strength and its greatest weakness. I personally really like the Bob Rock produced hip records. I also completely understand why other folks wouldn't necessarily. Rock's production style is definitely going to be a sticking point for a lot of folks, and this project is birthed from an era where Rock wasn't exactly doing a lot of his best work. It's also got that same kind of over-polished, sanded down approach that Rock really leaned heavy into on a lot of his post-Saint Anger stuff. I don't necessarily mind it, though. For an artist like Gord Downie, it feels like it fits a lot better than it does on other folks, but I know people that just piss blood over Rock's production style in these years, and you know, if that's not your thing, this definitely won't fit for you either. But I did still really enjoy this, and you can tell this was a project made with love. It was just two friends fucking around together and just making music they wanted to make. I can tell that they were definitely committed to this. Gord's songwriting is bouncy, light, and very expressive, as it always is, but especially so on this outing. He's not so full-on esoteric and weird as Gord could be with a lot of his lyrics. His mission statement for this record was to actually write an album of bouncy, fun, and optimistic jams, and he succeeded here. The tone is very cheery, very bright, very happy. It's a feel-good album, and Gord's songwriting and performances, man, again, he was such a talented guy. It really makes up, in my book at least, for any misgivings in the production. Though I also got to admit, this project doesn't feel essential necessarily. It's weird in that it feels made for like specifically 3 people, and I happen to be one of those people. But to anyone outside of this weird little tragically hip adjacent bubble, I don't know if it's gonna have that much standing appeal necessarily. But hey, if you are an old hip head, or you just really like the stuff that the Hip and Bob Rock were doing near the turn of the century, yeah, check this out. It's a nice time. I enjoyed it, and it definitely doesn't feel like one of those posthumous cash grabs that we sometimes get from artists who pass on. Hey, new cattle decapitation. Cool. God damn it, I used the same joke twice in one video. That's it, I'm canceled. Y'all, it's cattle decapitation. What more do you want me to say about it? They've always delivered solid as hell grooves, thrashy as fuck beats, and their vocalist Travis Ryan has a great howl and a terrific screech that has not really come down in quality over the years. They can play, They can set the mood and tone appropriately well. What they've got here is a well-oiled machine. It just works. You know, I've always said there's nothing wrong with being a one-trick pony if you're particularly good at your specific trick, and I'd say this is a great example of being very, very, very good at the thing that they do. And they always deliver. I'm always happy with a cattle decapitation record when I get it, even if I don't have much to say about most of them. It's heavy, it's thrashy, it's wild, it gives the fans exactly what they want without disappearing too much up their own asses. For cattle decapitation, again, what more could you really ask for? Fun fact about this record, I honestly wasn't all that familiar with either of these artists before going in. This is my exposure record. I gotta say I dug this. I'm a big fan of Kaytranada's production. These colorful and bright samples with these rich, powerful beats kind of fleshing everything out. Very 2010s house or like club jams of the era. He's low-key and very smooth in a lot of the beats he produces, but he is very talented. I dug a lot of the instrumentals on this thing. I also dig a lot of Amine's performances here. His rhymes and verses are just like super concentrated. And overall, I really like his goofy and chilled out kind of vibe. Dude's got a sharp as hell wit while maintaining this kind of lovable doofball aesthetic to everything. It feels like the kind of vibe that Jack Harlow has been trying to set up for himself for years now, but he just keeps fucking up. Amine feels like he's got that sort of style on lock. I do have to admit a lot of the features are damp squibs though. Freddie Gibbs, Pharrell Williams, Amare. But I don't, even on the track she's on, she doesn't do a lot. Hell, even Snoop Dogg shows up for what absolutely feels like a paycheck gig. Although, come on, it's Snoop Dogg. What gig isn't a paycheck gig for him these days? Also, Big Sean is on this record, and his track in particular is definitely one of the worst ones on this thing. All that having been said though, I don't have too much else to really say about this record. Definitely a nice record to throw on in the background while you work on homework or work projects or whatever. It's a chill vibe, but it's puddle deep, really. I feel like this record is boiled down to vibes. It's a chill little vibe. It's out here trying to do a chill little thing, and there's not a lot to it, but it pulls off what it's trying to do fairly effectively. Again, it's just one of those records that's not very ambitious. I know people who know these artists are a bit disappointed with this one. I'm not as disappointed with this. I can't help but feel like, even from my point of ignorance, that yeah, this should have been more than it was hyped up to be. Oh, the Used. My god, did I fuck with these guys in high school and college. Their self-titled debut and In Love and Death are still albums I get a lot of traction out of, mostly for nostalgia, but like, I don't know. I was listening to a lot of their older stuff here recently, and it goes harder than you'd expect it to. But they're also a band I definitely lost track of after the 2010s, and since then, I peek in on these guys every once in a while. I think I even reviewed one of their albums a long time ago. They're never outright bad, but I'm just never impressed. I just listen to it, forget about it, and move on with my life, more or less. So this album, I was kind of expecting more of the same. Ooh, wow. Wow. Y'all, this one's really pretty bad. In a way, this album definitely feels like a return to form. It's heavier and crunchier and growlier than a lot of their more recent work has been, but it also feels like a return to form to more the Lies for the Liars and the artwork era of Used. That's not the best era to return to if you're trying to do a throwback record, you know what I mean? Sonically, it's not great, but what kills this album stone dead is the lyrics. The absolute pessimistic, cynical doomerism of these fucking lyrics. I mean, the Used were always very emo, even for an emo band, but like this This crosses that line from playfully dark and morbid to just fucking try hard. You know how some people will criticize emo for all the "come on, rich and black my eyes," that kind of melodramatic stuff. The Used also had a fair amount to that, but when they did it, at least they would usually add some poetic license to it. A lot of times they would do that with literal poetry. Small, simple, safe price. But this album here, yeah, no poetry at all. No substance. No real kind of effort put in the lyrics. It's just fucking whiny. Bert's lyrics just come off as cynical and brain poisoned. It's all pessimism, and it's all to a very insufferable degree. I mean, I get it. We haven't had a lot to be happy about in the last handful of years. But dude, when you're even putting me off from complaining about shit, you're going overboard, man. Like, cheer the fuck up. Have a fucking cookie. It has none of the charm, flair, or experimentation that made the Used originally compelling. I guess it's not necessarily the worst record I've heard all year, but I definitely will have room for this on my worst of the year list. And like, it definitely feels like the worst Used album we've ever gotten. If you haven't been keeping tabs on this band, this definitely isn't a record you need to catch up with. In fact, I'd recommend you avoid this album if you are a Used fan. Look, just go spin In Love and Death Again. Ain't nobody gonna judge you for it. Sing along if you know the words. Small, simple, safe price. Rise the wake and carry me with all of my regrets. Man, I wanted to like this album more than I did. I'm sorry, I just gotta admit, I wasn't really feeling this one as much as her previous two post-Liberation albums. You know the story behind this one. It's kind of a miracle this record even exists at all, so credit where it's due for even getting the thing out. I certainly respect that, but man, this is just a fucking bummer of an album to sit through. Just on like a raw, did I enjoy this sort of record, I'm sorry, it was hard to get through. Not from like an incompetence sort of way. The album is still well made and Kesha still delivers good performances. It is still a solid record, just foundationally, absolutely. It's just a lot of the subject matter is a little hard to get through, and the vibe she's putting out on this record, again, I understand why she's doing it, y'all, but it's just, I don't know, it's no fun watching Kesha have to go through this. The album highlights a lot of the post-COVID depression and anxiety she's been feeling that a lot of us have probably been feeling. I understand how she's trying to reach us on that level, sure. It also covers a lot of the legal drama she's been tied up in. Kesha talking about her problems, she doesn't sound whiny or entitled, not nearly as whiny and entitled as Bert friggin' McCracken did on that last album. Again, I empathize with her a lot more, and she is definitely much more level-headed and reasonable about her situation. It's just, it's such a dreary listen. Especially given how inspiring and kind of feel good her last couple of records were. And the instrumentation and production here, she is evoking a very downbeat, very sad kind of atmosphere. It's not something she's particularly good at as an artist, you know? I understand where she's coming from, I do, but she's not very good at this style. She's not. The synth work is way too farty and sparse to really get us into that mood. It is nice to see that Rick Rubin has finally learned to quit peaking every goddamn thing, but the problem is he kind of moves a little too far in the other direction on this one. I know he's not the only producer here, but like, even considering what she's trying to go for, it just needs more meat on the bones. And I respect Kesha for going out there and laying all this out there as, again, as wholeheartedly and as bluntly, but I'm here to review the music. And just as music, when I sit down with it, it's hard for me to feel anything but okay. This kind of style just isn't a great fit. I got all my best wishes to her and her family and everything else, but I don't know, the music is just not that great. This wasn't a fun listen. Aw, this record is super duper cute. I love this. On their Bandcamp page, Pony described themselves as grunge pop, and you know what? I absolutely hear it here. Think if like the Breeders tried to make an album in the style of the New Radicals. Their singer has a very high soprano, and she sings in a very bright and chipper kind of demeanor. The guitars are also very bright and very cleanly distorted, and the drums are super bright and crisp, and the occasional bloopy, swooping synth work is also a nice accentuation to the overall sound. It almost sounds like it comes from an alternate universe where pop punk evolved directly out of grunge after it died. It's like if grunge kept its overall like snark and sarcasm, but lightened the fuck up big time. It's a pleasant, sunshiny, and fun as hell little romp. Fans of like chiller punk vibes or alternative rock that isn't like super duper up its own hole, definitely give this a shake. This is one of those records that will absolutely brighten your mood. Oh man, y'all remember how much I loved Arlo Parks' debut back in 2021? She was smooth, soulful, and just so mellow and comforting at a time where I really fucking needed it. I was wondering if her music would have the same effect now that I'm not, you know, quite as bad as that. The good news is, yes, she absolutely does. Man, her vibes, absolutely immaculate, this woman. Her voice is whispery and smooth, and her instrumentation is varied and perfectly engaging, while maintaining that silky, relaxing, and just captivating kind of relaxing numbingness. Even when she breaks out the distorted rock guitars for Devotion, even with that extra bit of crunch out of nowhere, it doesn't deaden the positive and soothing vibes that she is putting out. It is still an extremely cohesive sound, even with everything she goes out there and experiments with. It's comforting in a way that is very hard to pull off. It's not like teddy bear, hug your blankie, like a childish kind of comforting. This album feels like a perfect back rub. And Pegasus, the track she does with Phoebe Bridgers, God, she has been busy as hell this year, hasn't she? It's also very, very nice. Phoebe's more dark and down key style fits kind of perfectly against Arlo's sunnier atmosphere. It is absolutely the best thing to put on if you need to come down after a bad day, or you need to soak in the tub and just fucking forget about what happened that day. No, put this on and it will absolutely mend your wounds, fam. Absolutely throw this on your playlist. Fantastic work yet again. Strong recommendation out of me. Full disclosure, my friend Nick, who helps mod the CTXO Discord, is from Chile, and he turned me on to Alex Anwandter earlier this year, actually. Well, he turned us on to his previous band, Teleradio Donoso. Alex dropped a new album this year, and he sent this to my recommendations, and I figured, sure, I'll check it out. The thing about this record, this is a dance record. This is a dancey as fuck record. This may be one of the danciest records I've heard all goddamn year. It takes a lot from 80s club music and 90s EDM and house. Even some of the new disco stuff from like the early 2000s kind of slides its way onto here. Just anything and everything this guy could find that gets your body moving. He put it on this record, and he did a wonderful job of crafting it too. And Anwandter is also a lovely singer as well. His cadence and delivery is perfect for this kind of music, and he has a very tense and flexible singing voice. His vocals are extremely compelling and very energetic and lively, even though, Mi español es basura? That's always the issue when I review a record in a language I'm not fluent in. I just kinda have to judge the record on vibes alone, but I can say that the vibes are immaculate on this thing. Again, anyone looking for something to move your feet will get something big out of this, whether you habla español or no. And in doing my due diligence and chasing down the lyrics properly, this album is actually a big old ode to being queer and chasing love and affection in a world that's growing ever more hostile with your existence. And yeah, as someone on that rainbow myself, I can definitely feel that. That's a fucking mood, isn't it? I want to stress, I am not an expert at all when it comes to Latin music. Pretty sure that's apparent if you've seen any of my other Latin music reviews. But I know what I like, and I liked this. This is absolutely a ton of fun. It's worth checking out to see if it vibes. You might get something out of it. Hell yeah. Ooh, y'all, I really liked this record. I can't even front with you, I just loved this record. Let me sell you this record in one sentence. It's Muna, but like if they were an alt-rock band. Like if Muna and a lot of the bands of their ilk are just like too pop for you and you need something with a bit of distortion, something with a little bit of kick, this is definitely gonna hit the spot for you pretty well. Achingly relatable tracks about queer heartache and regret. I don't know, maybe I'm just a sad bitch, but I totally fuck with this, y'all. If you're looking for some queer-friendly, amazingly infectious pop rock and have worn your copy of the record down to nubs at this point, yeah, also pick this one up too. Look, not that I would know anything about this necessarily, but it has been a great year to be a sad queer girl. I'm just put this on the playlist too, ladies. That's all I'm saying. So McKinley Dixon, he is an artist I was familiar with. In fact, I actually tried him on for the first time with his last record, but I jumped onto that one super duper late in the year, and even when I was listening to it, I kind of felt a little out of my depth on it. I enjoyed it, but it took a while to like grow on me. It didn't make my list that year because I didn't quite have my mind made up about it. When I sat down to this album, it just instantly clicked for me. Just bam, okay, yeah, this is great. Although not even just because it took time to process. Like, this is just a very solid jazz rap record. The instrumentation is gorgeous and lush throughout. The horns, the sax, the strings, the jazz piano, all the jazz piano on this thing is just If you just released this as like an instrumental jazz record, it would probably still go over pretty damn well. But it's really Dixon's wonderful and poetic flow and lyricism that truly ties everything together. It's the kind of lyricism that cuts deep and is very, very sharp, while also being very succinct and precise. I've heard rappers take an entire album to break down concepts that he puts across in one or two songs. Like, the man is just a brilliant writer overall. That's where his talent truly lies. It is a little on the brief side, and I felt like it closed things down right as it was really starting to get good, but it did leave me wanting more in a very positive way. It doesn't feel like he just ran out of ideas and fucked off. It's like, no, he said what he had to say, and he didn't belabor any points. Outside of the short, maybe overly snacky length, though, I absolutely dug the hell out of this. I totally understand the hype behind this one, and yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the better hip-hop releases of the year, in my opinion. I have a feeling I'll probably have room for this on my bestie list. You know, I was pretty lukewarm on Pupil Slicer's debut. I mean, I enjoyed it overall, but it just didn't reinvent the wheel necessarily. This record, I feel like I do actively enjoy it a little bit more. I feel like there's definitely been a bit of sonic growth here. They're experimenting with some more atmospheric and slow burn elements here and there. I do appreciate that. They're willing to build some mood and some tension. I'd say my notes remain mostly the same. They're just not dramatically reinventing the wheel here either. Even with the little tweaks and changes here and there, I still get it. It's still Pupil Slicer. And I don't necessarily hate that, but I'm not as into it as a lot of other folks are. Fans of stuff like Dillinger Escape Plan, Converge, Unearth, or Jesus Piece, you know, that flavor of metal that is just heavy as shit, but can also get complex and noodly and technically flashy when it wants to, like that kind of vibe. This is definitely another one for y'all. If it's not something you're actively seeking out though, if this isn't your jam, I doubt this will be the album that converts you to that side of things, but it's solid for what it is. Protomartyr, they are a band I enjoy, but I definitely haven't kept great tabs on them necessarily. I'm pretty sure I listened to their last 2 records and just went, okay, this is Protomartyr, I get it, I can move on. So when I heard the buzz and the hype around this record, especially from a lot of people saying it was this bold reinvention of their sound and something they had never done before, I was hesitant to believe that. As it turns out though, yeah, fucking with the formula has worked out pretty well for these guys. This record feels way more stripped down and lean in terms of sound. Like, the title isn't just wordplay either. This record feels very inspired by like desert rock and western country specifically. The echoey guitars, the vibrant sun-soaked kind of vibes they're going for. Honestly, this record almost feels like what you'd get if you told Protomartyr to make like a Caius record. Hell, this is probably the closest thing to a punk record these guys are capable of making. It isn't nearly as like heady or esoteric as some of their more brain blasty material can be, and it honestly makes for a pretty nice ambassador to their general vibe if you aren't familiar with their work. At the end of the day though, it is still a Protomartyr record, and it still feels very much like a Protomartyr record. If things like unconventional song structure or Joe Casey's yelpy as hell vocal delivery, if that stuff rubs you the wrong way, this might just not be the vibe for you. Though if you are looking to dive in fresh, I'd say this would be the record to try it out in. It's just overall a very nice experience and a successful experiment in mixing up their formula. I dug it more than I've probably dug any Protomartyr record in recent history. It made for a nice mix-up, and I was on board for this. Again, honestly, solid recommend on this. Very nice record. How in the hell do the 400 unit keep topping themselves like this? Jason Isbell, you magic bastard. I think I say this about every 400 unit record I review, but this one feels like probably the best record they've made. This one is also the closest to like just a pure, good old, honest rock record that they've ever made too. This one draws a lot from guys like Springsteen and Crazy Horse. A lot of like classic rock in this particular sound. Driving beats, big choruses, heartfelt and passionate as hell lyrics about heartache, current events, what it's like to be an American in today's climate. Like, some of these lyrics. Put a little more distortion on this and cut down on stuff like the fiddles and the lap steel. You could almost call this a Foo Fighters record. It's surprisingly heavy. It's energetic, it's passionate, and Isbell's tales of love, life, and losing make this record another heart-rending experience. Again, it's been a weird year for country, and this latest 400 unit, absolutely one you need on your rotation. Even if you are not a big country guy, I know I got a lot of folks in my audience, well, I would never listen to country. I'm telling you, try it out. If this record doesn't hit for you, then okay, you just don't like country. Just nothing country is gonna break through to you. But like, man, you should give a record this good a chance to break through with you. Big time album of the year candidate, folks. I wish I had more to say about it. It's not bad. It genuinely isn't. It's very tight and very gorgeously produced. And Janelle is giving a hell of a performance on this thing too. She is more than committed to the gimmick of this album. She has given everything she's got to this thing, and her team delivered a very solid album for what it's trying to do. Absolutely. Honestly, it's the concept in general that kind of throws me off here with this one. This album is just so low stakes. I mean, her last album was Dirty Computer, and that thing fucking melted your cerebral cortex. And this one, I mean, it's fine, but it's just like, it's like a light summer jam. It's a summer jam record. Hey, it's summer vibes. You wanna have fun summer times? Let's have some fun summer times. Okay, Janelle Monáe. I was kind of expecting a bit more out of you. It's like if Radiohead released an album of Beach Boys covers. And you know, they'd probably do a good job at it too, but I would just have to sit there and wonder, why? Listening to this record, I kept getting flashbacks to Lord's Solar Power. Thank God this album is way better in execution than that one was. Honestly, it's not a bad little record. It's, you know, it's a chill piece of mellow summer hedonism, and like, she does a good job of pulling off that vibe. She does. Janelle at least accomplishes the goals she sets out to do. It's just like, I wasn't necessarily asking this from Janelle Monáe. It's not what I really wanted out of a Janelle Monáe record. She's just kind of having a goof with it, and it sounds like everyone had fun making this. And again, I will admit, in execution, it's fine. Again, if this record works for you, hey, good on ya. I'm glad you're having fun with it. There haven't been a lot of good summer bop records, so it's nice somebody went out there and tried to make one. I don't know, I just didn't get a lot out of this. Outside of this summer, I don't really see myself coming back to this one. It's fine, but like, man, I wish this record were so much more. I honestly do. Crash, why the hell are you reviewing a Gunna record? Well, if I can be honest, I've probably listened to the last 4 or 5 Gunna records he's put out. I hear a lot of people talk about him, and I just fail to understand what makes him interesting. Thankfully, with this record, there's at least an interesting story behind it. This album basically popped up as a response to a lot of the drama Gunna's been involved with right now. The RICO charges against YSL, his subsequent arrest, along with label mate Young Thug and several others, his plea deal, and the subsequent beef between him and the members of the rap community, and honestly, it's not a situation I know enough about to speak on at length, but I do have to admit, all that drama that's going on in the background and him actually discussing it on this record, it does help make it a little more interesting. It's interesting to hear him rap about something that isn't just the same old tired, boring, fuck your bitch, get your money. A lot of this album actually focuses on his jail time and the aftermath of his plea deal and having to wrestle with all of that. And, well, for a lot of it, he's very defensive and super cagey about things. But it's interesting to see him showing at least a little bit more passion and actual fire on some of his rhymes. He's not the worst in the world when he's actually focused on something and he has a solid topic to actually talk about. He's not fucking Kendrick or anything, but it's definitely more interesting than anything else I've ever heard him try. But at the same time, don't get it twisted. It's still a Gunna record, and it's still just chock full of blah. He talks about the juicy stuff mostly in the beginning of the record, but as we get towards the middle and the end, Gunna kind of just goes back to basics and falls back on those sleepy ass beats and his mediocre ramblings. Fuck your girl, get that money, I like drugs. I shall please have drugs, please. May I please have drugs? Sir, this is my perfect impression of Gunna. Like, this is exactly what he sounds like. I shall also have drugs, yes. I mean, I joke about his bars, but man, some of the stuff he spits on this thing.
2 kids a piece of his pay ready. Cash. She's too basic, I'm Tom Brady. Pass.
Yeah. And after Born Rich, I swear to God, I cannot be imagining this. It sounds like there's like a smoke alarm with a dead battery going off in the background. Please tell me I'm not the only person who noticed this. It just randomly cuts in for like the next 3 or 4 tracks. I cannot be hallucinating this, and it drove me fucking crazy. Change your goddamn battery. Whatever producer missed that or purposefully left that in, fuck you. Even despite this album's more interesting moments, it's still really boring and padded, and there's just not much here. Really, I'm only talking about it because there's more here than there usually is. It still ain't very much. There is maybe like an EP's worth of interesting material here, and then everything else is the same old filler and bullshit Gunna always packs his albums with. Even at 45 minutes, this thing just feels like it's begging to end. Even Gunna at his very, very best is still just an amazingly boring artist. Yeah, dude, fix your fucking smoke alarm. I swear to God. Oh, thank God, something way better. Yeah, new Body of Light. Fuck yeah. More Depeche Mode adjacent style dark synth pop. I'd say on this record they've leaned a teensy bit harder into the dark wave style. Like, they've really turned up the spooky tonality on this record. It's very dark, it's very appealingly sinister, but it also makes for a very danceable, alluring, and just mellow fun time. It's a hell of a ride. I wouldn't say it's a necessarily deep record by any means, or even a record that steps too far outside of their comfort zone. If you didn't care for this band before, I'm not sure this is going to be the one that converts you or anything, but they are still out here making some damn fine 80s goth-inspired night jammers, and like, again, this has been my mood here recently, so I'm all about this. When Halloween rolls around and you want something that's just Casio core as fuck, absolutely add these guys to your playlist. Another extremely blissful, extremely bleepy bloopy, and extremely solid groove. Recommended. So if you watch my channel, this is probably a familiar name. I went absolutely gaga for Amber Bain's 2019 project, Good at Falling, and when I heard she was going to be releasing more stuff, I was excited as hell. Couldn't wait for this one to drop. And this record also hits a lot of the same notes I liked about the last one. It's earnest, it's melodic, it's sweeping and very huge feeling emotionally. It's the same kind of downbeat electronic indie pop that just, like, scratches me in just the right place. Songs about queer romance and longing and deep, wrenching intimacy. This album is a real heartstring tugger. That's the thing I've always loved about Japanese house, is the poetry in a lot of her lyrics. She does a fantastic job of painting a scene and showing you a snapshot of what a relationship looks like for her in a specific moment in time. Whenever she sings about a topic that's deep or mournful or happy or traumatizing or whatever, she is an absolute pro at capturing the emotional weight of the situation. You just feel what she's singing about 1000%. This record definitely has a bit more fun to it. There's a little bit more energy, a bit more pep and kick to some of the tracks. And I think a lot of that is probably due to the production team that Amber got in for this one. They do a lot to make this record sound unique. Justin Vernon from Bon Iver is here. The gals from Muna show up for a song. Always happy to hear that. And a lot of the major production weight seems to have been carried by George Daniel and Matt Healy of the 1975. If I do have a small problem with it, it's just that this production style, the stuff that Daniel and Healy have been bringing along, it is kind of that typical 1975 style production. And to be honest, I'm just kind of suffering from a bit of Jack Antonoff syndrome when it comes to them. I'm just getting kind of sick of it. Y'all, I can't miss you if you never fucking go away. Even then, I wouldn't call that like a huge setback. It's just a little nitpicky thing that I'm personally getting a little tired of. And the thing is, Amber Bain absolutely rises above any misgivings I may have in the production. Again, she's a very talented songwriter and exquisite performer. This one's still absolutely worth your time, especially if you dug the last record. Give it a shot. It's still a very nice ride, despite a few very, very minor problems. Still recommended. I came into Lil Uzi Vert super late. I bounced in during the Eternal Atake period. Eternal Atake. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that, and I don't care. But the hype for that record was so through the roof, I figured I needed to at least give it a shot. I walked into that record, and it was just a great big old nothing burger. So I tempered my expectations a little bit walking into this one, and I do have to admit, this is definitely a more interesting project. I mean, you can tell Uzi wanted to work outside of their comfort zone, and I'd say they've definitely done that, at least on a few tracks here, but I'd say the problem lies in execution. I mean, we've all heard their take on Chop Suey by this point, right?
Why'd you leave the keys up on the table? Here you go create another family. You wanted to. Preparation, put a little makeup. You wanted to.
That became a meme for all the wrong reasons, but you know, to their credits, I want to be a little nice here. Chop Suey is a hard as fuck song to do. You need two vocalists preferably, and you both need to trade between the harmony and the melody at a moment's notice. You both need to sing well and scream well. Your harmony guy needs to also have a really good growl. There's a reason you've never heard a decent karaoke rendition of this. Avril Lavigne also had to learn this lesson the hard way. Like, it's bad, but I don't want to drag them too hard for it. Like, everybody has to learn that Chop Suey lesson at some point. But even then, a lot of the other big talking points behind this record aren't really much to talk about. The Bring Me the Horizon feature, honest to God, it just feels like a Bring Me the Horizon song that Uzi's just trying to like horn in on. He's barely a presence. The Baby Metal feature in particular feels like they just had a B-side lying around and Uzi showed up at their door and was like, hey, can I use this for my record? And they're just like, will you pay us for it? Yeah, okay, just keep them royalty checks coming in, bud. And that, I think, is my overall problem with Lil Uzi Vert. They are just the most uninteresting part of any song they're a part of. Like, they just don't add anything to the features that do show up on this album, and the songs they have to carry by themselves are just, again, nothing burgers that I can't even remember. And even its more notable train wreck moments aren't like that big of a deal. I don't know, again, this record on the whole is just boring. Maybe the Uzi faithful will like this more than I do, and I will admit some of these songs probably do go off pretty hard live, but I don't know, in an album setting, it's just, I don't know, it's just hard to care. And those are the albums for quarter two, but before we wrap things up, how about we do a few albums I missed back in quarter one as well? You know, Bentley is one of those artists I've always kept, like, light tabs on, but I've never really sunk my teeth in with an entire record of his. I generally like the stuff I hear, but I've never actually sat down with the guy. And finally getting to one of his records, I think I kind of see why. He's not bad, he is a very talented instrumentalist, and he's decent at telling a story when he wants to. He is an artist, at least in my opinion, that works better in pieces than as a whole. There are some great tracks on it, some stuff I really did enjoy, but sitting through the entire record, I don't know, there's just not a lot of cohesion going on here. There's not a lot that makes me want to not hit that skip button. Again, when he's good, he is very good. I do like how heartful and sad he can be on certain tracks, but he can also be doofy and fun, and he can bounce between those various vibes without too much effort. I mean, this album has Walking Each Other Home and Beer at My Funeral on it, and they both come off pretty well without making this album sound schizophrenic by any means. So again, that's a hard trick to pull off. So more credit to the man for being able to walk that fine line and pull it off effectively. But he's not, like, consistently good. The whole album isn't as good as its brighter moments. There's definitely some lulls, definitely a few tracks that feel like filler. I guess the best way to put it is that he is a very solid hand when it comes to country. If this were wrestling, I'd say he's a hell of a worker. I don't know, maybe this wasn't the best record to judge by necessarily, but man, his music, at least in long stretches, it just lacks an oomph factor or something that really sticks its hook in you. If you're into Bentley, I'd say this is definitely worth your time, and if you're looking for more non-offensive, generally agreeable country, you certainly could do worse out there. Is there a lot you need to hear? Is this a must-spin record? I admit I got weird taste when it comes to country, but I would say no. Still not a bad record by any means. I generally liked it. I promise I'm not doing this to just punch down an angry reviewer man on this one. I don't know, sometimes you just want to check in on somebody. And working on those last two Best New Artist vids kind of reminded me that, oh yeah, Macklemore exists. Is he still putting out music? Oh, okay, he's still putting out music. What does he sound like these days?
Time to show off. I'm so Warhol, so sophisticated. Life is bitchin', baby.
I think the big problem with Macklemore is that he just hasn't grown, adapted, or developed at all since his original big break. This music still sounds like a relic from 10, maybe even 15 years ago. His lyricism and beat arrangements have not gotten better with age. His lyrics are still cornball as hell, and not necessarily in an appealing way. He's still on that whole positivity, proto-Andrew WK shtick. His stuff in 2023, it just reads like a bad motivational poster. And particularly on this album, the beats are really low energy. A lot of stuff on here is just desperately boilerplate and inoffensive. A lot of these tracks are just screaming, please put this in an IKEA commercial. On the whole, though, I guess it's not offensive necessarily, outside of just being like offensively mediocre. And a lot of Mac's flow and rhyming patterns are really, really bad, but newsflash, they pretty much always were. He sounds almost amateurish. He sounds like a sixth grader who just discovered hip-hop, scrawling his first few bars into his school notebook. And for a dude who's been in the industry for literal decades, I'm just shocked at the lack of growth and development. I mean, y'all, I hate to be mean, but this thing sounds like Christian rap without actually being Christian rap. And it's so crushingly long. Or at least it feels that way. At 54 minutes, it's definitely not the longest hip-hop record I've ever had to sit through, but my God, it is just a slog to have to sit through an hour of this cheesy bullshit. I feel like a lot of people don't care about Macklemore in 2023. For whatever it's worth, you're right not to. He's not out here doing anything you need to catch. Woof. Oh, City in Color. I am so glad we got a new City in Color this year. Dallas Green's solo project has been putting out amazingly low-key, folk-tinged, acoustically driven goodness for almost 20 years now. Yes, really, 20 years. People, sometimes was a long time ago. But I do have to admit, I quit paying deep attention after Hurry and the Harm. Not even for any specific reason, necessarily. I just spun it, forgot it existed, got too busy. I don't know, one thing led to another thing, and I just got caught up, and I kind of forgot that City in Color existed for a little while there. What could have happened in 2013 that took up so much of my attention? But with a new record out, I figured now is as good of a time as any to check in on Dallas and see how he's doing, especially after that last Alexis on Fire record. Good stuff. Is City in Color still good? Yeah, absolutely. Still very, very solid. Dallas is just an outstanding performer, and he's great at pouring his whole heart into his lyrics and performances. When he wants to, this man with his lyrics and his performances can just take your heart and yank it out of your chest, show it to you, and just stick it back in and say deal. And the instrumentation on this is as solid as ever. Mellow organs, quiet acoustic guitars, very understated lap steels and Americana and country elements here and there when we need to break them out. All of it comes together to build this smooth, lulling, and gorgeous ode to heartbreak, inner turmoil, and personal grief. Just wonderful, sad, soulful music. Is it album of the year material? I guess my big heads up on this one is if you've ever heard any other City and Color record, this one doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel or anything. It's pretty much exactly what you'd expect City and Color to sound like. Does he need to really change up his formula that much? I guess that's up for debate, but he is very, very good at this thing he does. Again, I always say, nothing wrong with being a one-trick pony if you're good at your trick, and Dallas Green is very, very good at his trick. But on that same card, if I wanted to pitch City and Color to you, I'd say you should probably check out some of his more notable records rather than this one. Like, I like this record, and I even like some of his later stuff, but I love stuff like Bring Me Your Love or Little Hell or Sometimes. And like, as much as I like this record, it isn't Little Hell good, you know what I mean? But it does what it says on the tin, and Dallas still does it very, very well. For me, at least, that's enough. I still fuck with City and Color, and I'm happy Dallas is still out there doing it. It seems like a project he has a lot of personal passion for, and he does put his whole heart into it. So even if I don't necessarily adore everything he's out here doing these days, he's still doing a solid job. Not an album of the year candidate, but still a very solid release. Keep on keeping on, dude. And that's the Fimi for Q2 2023. Thanks again for watching, y'all. Special thanks to our $5 and above patrons, Aaron Walker, Dylan Perez, Dylan Rare Hunter, Foxy Lover 92, John T. Bowen, Constructivist, Lee Hazel, Nick Barrows Johnson, Ryan William Schilling, Yoshi Chaichi, Ardmi Musha, Alex Sobalu, Chris Doman, Cordelia of the Seas, David Prince, Errol Henderson, Freddie Thomas, Gina at Love B. Jones, Jared Stone, Jason Semler, Cole, Lainey Wilson, Lilith Estelle, Mars Hunter, Mexican Link 1986, Michael K, Rocked, Rowan Cookie, Sarah Aubin, Ted Z, Warped Kia, Akshay W, Mark Grondin, and Dominic Noble. Thanks again for watching, y'all. Stay tuned for more content in the very near future. I'm Crash Thompson, and I will see ya when I see ya.